We don't even know if that's been shown. They announced what they showing or anything else.
I don't know.
You know, that's
Well, the schedule.
the whole concept was outrageous, though. To have to get a copyright permission from Hamas
Yeah.
to be able to show their footage is just outrageous.
Here's a legal question. Somebody posts on social media will become public domain. Not necessarily.
No,
But
you can't go on to Google Images, grab an image and put it into your website or onto your.
And if I post something on Facebook, I don't have Facebook. I did.
So the funny thing, you have to ask a terrorist permission for something.
Apparently, I did have a TV.
Do you have any rights at all?
No, it's like asking the Nazi Party for footage from the liberation of the camps, you know.
Or a criminal, you know what? I have video. Can I release it because you're in the video? Can you
Yeah,
please sign it?
so that's the crazy side of it. If the burglar cuts his wrist breaking into the house because he broke the glass, right? Basically, you can see the damages.
There's also what the rabbi mentioned before in the US. Here, there's also this exception of fair representation.
Yeah, fair use. Yeah.
Fair use, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And also, because it's Hamas, the court wouldn't enforce their copyright even if they had one, right? It would be against public policy to enforce their copyright.
Right.
So there's no way that it could be stopped.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we did a little unit on
Resile from their.
The result.
There's
a movie called The Resile.
Well, what are you doing?
No.
Come
You said something out of a post on the chat yesterday, there was.
Okay. All right. So yeah, we did some discussion on intellectual property a while back, but anyway, let us go on. So anyway, sha'ar lashonos hamachayvim es ha'arevut, that you know, different languages that make you into an arev, like in other words, when you're getting verbally involved. She'ela mishamar lamal v'tein lo va'ani notein lach. If what if a guy says to a lender, give him the money and I'll cover it, or I'll give you. O shamar lo tein lo va'ani kablan, or if I say, give him and I accept. I'm a kablan. I'm an acceptor. Okay. O shamar lo halvehu va'ani arev, or if he says lend him and I'll be the guarantor. Arev. O hilvehu va'ani poreya, or pay him and I'll pay back. Halvehu va'ani chayav, or lend him and I'm obligated. O shamar lo halvehu va'ani kablan, o tein lo va'ani kablan. All these different languages. Ha'im kisha'amar. Just skip down. Bilashono talalu lamal v'yeshel avdin shel arev kablan v'yochel yipar mimenu tchilam yirtze. So do these languages that I use make me automatically not only into an arev but into an arev kablan, which means that the guy can come to me first if he wishes? O ein elu elo lashono shel arev bilvad v'lo lashon shel arev kablan. Or do these languages only make me into a guarantor, like we've learned before, but not necessarily into an arev kablan?
So are we saying that each one of those terms are the same strength? They are the same.
Yeah, they'll all have the same strength to make you into an arev. You have to be very careful about how you speak. Even just telling the lender, give him the money and I'm good for it. Just using those words make you into an arev. The question is, what language specifically makes you into an arev kablan, which means that I'm like a co-borrower, that you can come to me first. So tshuva, so the answer is yesh chiluk bein halashonot shehuzkaru matay nechshav arev kablan or arev stam. There is a distinction among the poskim as far as what language you use to determine whether you're a regular arev or an arev kablan. Kagon mishamar lamalva tein lo va'ani notein lach. If I use the language, give him and I'll give you back. I don't just say I'm the guarantor. but give him the money and I'll cover it. Okay? So by saying that, you become an Ariv Kablan because you're making yourself, the language
It's
implies
more than representation.
that-
He's a good guy.
yeah.
Like,
Right. Afal pi shahamal velo amar al manas she'efram imi she'ertza. So therefore, even if the lender, when he gives the money, doesn't make that stipulation that I'm lending this money on the condition that I can collect from whichever I want. Avalim amar l'shanot elu. But if you use other language, hilvehu va'ani arev, lend him and I'm the guarantor, or hilvehu va'ani poreya, or lend him and I'll pay, or hilvehu va'ani chayav, or lend him and I'm liable, or hilvehu va'ani notain, or lend him and I'll give, or hilvehu va'ani kablan, or lend him and I'm a kablan. He doesn't say arev kablan, he just says kablan. I'm an acceptor. Kulam l'shanot arevutein. These are all languages of guarantorship. V'dat maran ha'shulchan aruch shafilu mamar tein lo va'ani kablan eino elo lashon arev bilvad. The Bachaber is of the opinion that in all of those languages, you're just a regular Ariv. You're not an Ariv Kablan. In other words, the only time you're an Ariv Kablan is when you say, give him and I'll give you. In other words, you're using a reciprocal language. Give him and don't worry, I'll give it back to you. So that makes you into an Ariv Kablan. But using anything that's a little bit more ambiguous, you're just an Ariv. However, he says, Ulam l'dat harama ba'haga shulchan aruch kishomer b'lashon zeh tein lo vani kablan nasa Ariv Kablan. But according to the Rama, if you say give him and I'll be the Kablan, then you also become an Ariv Kablan. V'yesh misha omer mal v'shomer leploni. She'im ani alve l'Reuven kach v'kach mos ha'im tiyeh muchan liot lo arev. So some say that if the lender, at the time when he's about to lend the money, says, "If I give Shimon the money, will you, Reuven, be the guarantor? Are you prepared to be the guarantor?" Im Amar Hain. So if Reuven says yes, Harezen Nasa Arev Af Shalo Hosif Yoter Al Hain. So then the guy automatically becomes an Arev, even if all he just said was the word yes. He doesn't have to say anything else explicitly. Is just by saying yes, a one-word answer, you're on the hook. You may not be an Ariv Kablan, but you're still going to be an
I
Ariv.
mean, ultimately, the difference is that you can go directly to the other couple and collect the money as opposed to going to the debtor first, right? That is the.
No, only when you're an Ariv Kablan can you do
Right,
that.
that's the difference.
That is the
But
difference.
If the guy doesn't have the money, it doesn't really matter if you're whatever, you're a stam or you're a couple, you have to pay the debt.
Correct. But there's a major difference. When you say the guy doesn't have the money, what does that mean? Does he have a house? Does he have a car? He'll have to liquidate those before I, as a creditor, can be on the hook. Right? So I can say back to it's only like in Ron's case where the guy just disappears. Where did the guy actually disappear? Oh, he didn't disappear.
It was the second guarantor that didn't pay out the last case.
And what about the guy, the debtor himself? Did he have a house?
Still got intentions to, eventually, when he gets his whole life situation together, that he does. I've spoken to him, I have communication with him, he doesn't want to get it all back.
Yeah, you've been sitting by the phone this whole time, right?
No, not the situation, but more the, because it's the guarantor that I have a little bit more of an issue with, that. Walk away from. Obviously, he's run into some financial difficulty himself, it's not like we're talking, many thousands.
Got it. Okay.
So no witnesses, no nothing, his word against his word. This comes down to.
Well, hamotzi mechavero olav
So he has
haraya.
to prove it, so.
Yeah. So if the guy denies it, he says, "I never said I was going to be a guarantor." So then, yeah, but then the question is, the base then will ask, but when he asked you, will you guarantee the money? Did you say yes? So, and if he's honest,
It's a lie, if he doesn't.
correct.
And also you need to remember exactly which word did you use,
Uh-huh.
not only yes.
It's probably advisable that in any situation where someone asks you your advice as far as whether someone is a credible borrower, you just say, "I'm going to preface my words by saying that I am not prepared to in any way guarantee any loans. So you give a disclaimer at the very front before you say anything else. And then with all of that said, I think he's a nice guy. I think he's honest. I think if he says he's going to pay you back, he'll pay you back. Shine. Genug.
Well, what if you said it? My experience at the time when I loaned the money was
Yeah.
with that.
Also, but I would also say, I would also disclaim it at
You're not
both
guaranteeing.
at both at the beginning and at the end, especially because my lawyer is right here. Right?
Yeah, because-
Right? Isn't that the logical?
I think the end is more important than the beginning because in the big, otherwise you are like, okay, no lending, but for me worked very well. Okay, so you're recommending.
Yeah.
But if you say for me it was very well, but I don't offer anything, so you are like saying good things and then the last statement.
Yeah.
How does this work in other categories? So for instance, in a shidduch, someone calls you and say, is this a good girl or a good boy for my son or daughter to go out with? And you say, oh, they're fantastic, they're great, and then they go out and the girl's a psychopath or something. You know, how far does this go?
Well, could there be financial damages to a person who makes a reference on a business or on a shidduch? Absolutely. Absolutely. It doesn't just apply to loans, but there it's a question of nezikin. There it's a question of damages. It's not a question of being a guarantor on a loan. It's not like I say, trust me, you'll have 50 good years of marriage if you marry this girl. Trust, I'll cover that, right? Right, so that, you know, I can't make good on that if she
So
makes.
it's nizik, it's mental, whatever, it's all the other categories.
A person can be sued for damages if he gives a recommendation that it can be proven that he knew when he was speaking that he was withholding information or was giving incorrect information. And that
goes on all the time on those resumes.
well, no. A resume is what the girl writes herself. Then she writes is these are my references. I'm a reference on hundreds of resumes. I'm sure you're a reference on a bunch of resumes too. But that doesn't mean that you're vouching for the girl or the boy. It just means call me if you'd like to discuss. That's what a
call, get the info.
So whenever you get a call for a shidduch, for example, you should say, if you happen to think that it's a fine person, say, I think she's a fine person or he's a fine person. And then what questions would you like to ask me? That's the first thing I always say. What questions would you like to ask? And the reason why I do that is because it's not my role as a reference to volunteer information that they may not be interested in. Like, for example, there are some idiotic people that the first question that they'll ask about a boy is, does he wear a black hat during davening? Which to me is an indication that you're not a serious quality family. And I would recommend that the boy not go out on a date with your daughter. I don't say that, of course, but when that's the first question that I get,
You know where they're holding.
I know where they're holding. These are superficial people with superficial values. Okay.
Do they use dishes or do they use paper plates?
For the tiny dishes,
Yeah.
Paper towels or not?
Now, have you ever been in both? Like you're referencing both sides that they call you for the girl and they call you for the boy, and you're like.
Yeah. I've been a
That's
reference
common.
on both sides. Is it common? If it's a local shidduch, yeah, it will be common.
Then you know you can well, what do you want to know? You'll just answer exactly what they are looking for. As you say, you
Yeah.
don't want to get information, and you answer what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you say recommendations, you can be liable. But what about suggestions? If you suggest something, it's like similar but not so intense, no?
Suggest like what, a shidduch?
No, when somebody asks you, and you say that before we get to the shit, like when you recommend something, you can be liable if you know.
If you give a false
If you suggest
representation.
something, it's like it's not the same as a recommendation because people say I don't recommend anything, but I can suggest to you do something. It's the same thing or it's not the same thing.
I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with telling a person, I went to such and such a mechanic. He treated me very well, charged me a reasonable price. I think you would do well by him. based on my experience. There's nothing wrong with that. And if the guy turns out to be a shyster to that guy and he wasn't a shyster to you, you're not giving him any false information. You can't be held liable
Based
for
on your
that
experience.
based on your experience. Yeah. Okay. Next, she'ela. Ha'im yesh mitzvah lahalvot legoy, o yesh kan isser lo techanem ve'in lahalvot lo. Is it permissible to lend money to a non-Jew? Or is there some kind of halachic problem of not, the Torah says, lo techanem, do not give free gifts to heathens, to idolaters. So,
Preface the question,
well, he's not making any distinction. Look, remember, this is an Israeli Sephardi posek. He probably has very limited interaction with non-Jews to begin with. And every non-Jew that he's thinking about is described in the Gemara as a heathen. He's not making any distinction because he probably hasn't analyzed the finer details of what is the different kinds of non-Jews that exist in the Western world, right? He's thinking about an Arab, right? He's thinking about Mahmoud, can you lend Mahmoud the money? Okay, is there a prohibition or not? So he says, Tshuva, yesh omrim she'ein mitzvah lahalvot lagoy, ela im kein kishemalvelo tzarech lakachat min hagoy ribit alva azu. Some say that there is no mitzvah to lend money to a non-Jew, right? And that seems to be clear. So I think, again, this language is imprecise. He's using the incorrect language. What he means to say is you should not lend money to a non-Jew unless you charge him interest. In other words, there are some opinions who say that you should not give free interest-free loans to non-Jews. Vafilu im hagoy asalo tova, and this is true even if the Gentile had done a kindness for you in the past. Shim eno malve beribit mevatel mitzvat aseh lanochri tashich. And the basis for that is that the Torah says explicitly, in talking about the prohibition to lend on interest to a Jew, it says, lanochri tashich ula'achicha lo tashich. It says, give interest-bearing loans to the Nochri, to the non-Jew, but do not give interest-bearing loans to the Jew. So it seems there's two ways to interpret it. It could be you may charge interest, or you shall charge interest. So there's two different ways of reading that verse in the Torah.
If you don't charge an interest, you're over a lot.
You're over an aseh. You'd be over a mitzvah's aseh, according to this opinion. Now, who is this opinion? Who is he citing here? Let's see. He's citing the Rambam.
That's like the lanes that used to
Say Hagoy v'ger toishav lovin mehenu malvin osan beribis. So it says the Rambam paskins the non-Jew and the resident non-Jew. That's a ger toshav, which means even when he accepts upon himself the 7 Noachide laws, you should lend them money with interest, as it says lo tashich le'achicha. You shall not offer interest-bearing loans to your brother. La'achicha aser v'lishar ha'olam mutar u'mitzvahs aseh la'ashich legoy. Right? To the rest of the world, you may and you should, specifically, is of the opinion of the Rambam. Shenamar la'nochri tashich mipi hashmuel lamdu shuzu mitzvahs aseh v'zehu din Torah. So the Rambam seems to be of the opinion that it's a mitzvahs aseh. So the Tur writes, Ha'idna mutter l'chol b'chol mine ribis. You're allowed to lend money to all manner of non-Jew, whether he's a heathen or a Noachide. You can lend the money as long as you charge interest. Mishum she'iyef shalanu lihistaker mishum masa umatan im lo shenisa v'niteni mayim. Why? Because nowadays a Jew can't make a living unless we do business and extend loans to non-Jews. Im kain lo shaykh beribis shema yilmud bimasav tvei mishar masa umatan. And therefore, the only concern that existed at some point in the past is that you shouldn't lend money to heathens, meaning real idolaters, because by engaging in business with them, you may learn from their ways. In other words, it creates social interaction. When
Mixed
you,
dancing.
right, it could lead to mixed dancing, right? V'chein kasu hatois sham b'gemara, v'ayin lamar shulchan aruch sham, shepasak asur litain matnas chinam lo'ovik l'chavim she'enu makiro, aval b'makiro lahava layu shem matana elakim mechira shorisham gemulo o kvar shilam lo. The Shulchan Aruch writes something very interesting. He says that if this is a Gentile that you're friends with, he's a neighbor or he's an acquaintance, so then you are allowed to give him an interest-free loan. And the reason is because invariably he will do a favor for you in return. Since you have already social interaction with him, then it is permissible to do that because you will benefit from it in the end. Let's see.
So halacha l'maisa.
Let's see. So he quotes here now from the Maharsha, who says, "Bevadai im osa v'kochavim tova v'chesed im Yisrael," that if a non-Jew has done an act of kindness with a Jew, chayev lasud gam kim imo chesed u'lehitiv lo, then you have to reciprocate with kindness. V'halva below neshechu chesed yoter min hamatana, shaharbe yavo shelokachat matana below lilvot. And a lot of people would consider a loan to be a higher kindness than a gift. Why? Because with a gift, there's a certain embarrassment. With a loan, it minimizes the embarrassment. So you see clearly that there's a machlokus between the Rambam and other poskim. The Rambam seems to say that the Rambam is the hardliner here, even though normally he's the softliner, but here he's the hardliner. He seems to be of the opinion that even if the person is a Noachide, he's not an idolater, you still have a mitzvahs aseh to only lend him with interest. So it's a machlokus.
He's an idolater, but he's done you a favor and he's your neighbor.
Yeah. So it's a machlokus. It's a machlokus.
As long as you don't dance with them, it's okay.
Yeah.
Well,
By the way, people asking for loans can be extremely embarrassing as well, as opposed to getting a gift.
right, but it's less embarrassing.
The difference between a gift and a loan.
If
is
a person-
You're allowing the person to have self-esteem that they can back back.
Yeah,
If you
but I
give
mean-
them as a gift, you're treating them as if they're a pauper.
I
That's
go through
right.
this all the time with my employees. I have a whole list of this one owes me, we just take it off their paycheck over 6 months and
That's probably
7 or 8 of them constantly borrowing. And it's very embarrassing for them to come to my office. And I know right away when they come there, they have that look, when I talk to them.
They need an advance.
And,
But you'll find most of it probably happy to talk to you rather than go to the cash and check before the pay or whatever, places that take your paycheck. Because I lose so much, so they're desperate from that perspective. So you're giving them by giving them an advance on their pay.
it's not an advance, it's on top of their pay.
However you work it, you're still giving them the ability to have self-esteem in what they're doing. Whereas if they go to the cash for whatever it is, these cash places, the interest they charge and what they do is I don't even know how they're legally allowed
Why most of them don't like to come to me. They'll go to my CFO or.
Hmm.
to. Yeah.
But the bottom line is, because it's a machlokus, you have a right to be lenient and say, yes, I'll lend you money without
Well, it's also
interest.
because they work for me and they work extremely hard for me.
Yeah.
So I have that.
And you are benefiting from it. You're directly benefiting from giving them loans.
And you're also getting loyalty that they're gonna stay with
Yeah.
you, but things get.
No, it's
tough,
all
whatever.
that stuff is all
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
But we're just clarifying, is it us or is it Martha?
Right.
This is-
Now, if
this is
so,
what
so
I'm
I mean,
saying.
I would say to a person who asked me the shaila, is it us or is it mutter? I would say it's a machlokes. You have a right to be lenient and not charge interest. But if you want to be machmir like the Rambam, tell the guy, I'm charging you an extra $1. You know, so I'll lend you $1,000. You owe me 1,001. Hey, that's all. Okay. All right, next.
You have to tell the reason.
Well, no, you don't have to tell them the reason. Don't tell them the
I
reason.
had crazy, they always come with me with the reason. They will tell me why, because I think it's more uncomfortable to say, I don't have enough to live with the month. No. Craziest one, one told me that they were building a place in Manila, outside of Manila, and they had to dig up his grandparents' grave,
Oh my.
and he needed money for that.
He had to pay for that.
It was his grandparents, he was the only, his parents weren't
No,
alive
no, no,
anymore.
but I mean, the fact that someone wanted to dig up the area, he had to pay for his grandson.
Yeah, because no one there had money to pay for it then.
So
No, no,
apparently the
no.
minhag is to bury mom and dad in the backyard.
But close,
Yeah.
it's good for the garden.
I'm not sure about that. I mean,
It's good for the vegetables. We should-
Thanks, Grandpa. Okay, anyway. All right. Im yesh mitzvah lahalvot avrayan. Is there a mitzvah to lend money to a person who is a sinner? So mishahu avrayan b'mezid al achat mikol hamitzvot hamort b'torah v'lo asa tshuva eino chayav lahachioto v'lo lahalvoto. If a person is a deliberate sinner on one of the major commandments of the Torah, like in other words, like it's explicit, and he's not doing tshuva, you don't have to lend him money, and you have no obligation to sustain him financially. So this is, by the way, this doesn't take, again, is an Israeli. It's not taking into account the Tinok Shenishba factor. Like the Chazon Ish himself, who had lived in Eretz Yisrael, clearly understood this concept. He's not taking that into account. What about the fact that he's a Tinok Shenishba? I'll tell you, even in this community, sometimes it does bother me that there's a distinction made. Let's say there's a certain organization that provides food for people for Shabbos.
So Tomchei Shabbos, I had this whole disagreement with them, but they only provide food for frum families.
They will only provide food for Shomer Shabbos families. And I've had people come to me who are not Shomer Shabbos. And I said, and they wanted to know if they could get Tomchei Shabbos because they had heard about it. And I'm in other communities, they don't make that distinction, but in this community they do. And I don't think that's right. But what am I going to say? You know, they're doing wonderful work, like you can't, even when you're critical, you still have to support Tomchei Shabbos because they're doing great work for the frum community. But at the same time, it does disappoint me, I guess I should say.
How do they confirm that the families are getting the funds?
A rabbi has to sign off on the application. Yeah, I've signed a number of Tomchei Shabbos applications. All right, we'll hold it here for today. We will not be meeting next week or the week after. So you guys have a 2-week vacation from me. Yeah.
More in Israel?
Well,